All right. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Oh, that kid. I don't know if you guys have seen that kid before. Whoever his dad is, he's doing something right. So I'll just put that in. Anyways, shameless plug out of the way. So I see a lot of familiar faces. A lot of you know me. I've been around this church for over 10 years now. Some of you like me, some of you, I'm not sure. But everybody is loving, so that's what matters. If you don't recognize me or know me, then it's, my family, again, has been here for a while. And so kind of getting into why I'm up here, because I'm usually the guy that's in the back and not the guy that's in the front, is that over the last couple of years, I have found kind of a renewed spirit in really diving into my scriptures and diving into kind of how I do things and how I see things. And I actually have a note in the top of my Bible. It's in Acts chapter 15, where as I was studying one morning it was January of 21, I felt this presence that said, you should share a message with the church. Now, I said, okay, wrote it down, kind of shoved those feelings aside for a while, as, that is intimidating, right? So now we get into this, as I continued to kind of grow, then it became, you should try and do something with the men in the church. And so then I was like, okay, that one I can do. I can figure that one out. That still took me like 6 months to say yes to, but I can do that one. And so as a part of that, then it came up in a discussion during that men's group, about being called to do things, and I mentioned this feeling I had. And as fate would have it, Pastor Reed was on the call that morning, and within 30 seconds of me making that statement, Pastor Reed sends me an email, we would love to have you share a message with the church. So here we are. You can only hide so long, right? Now, as I get ready to speak my message this morning, if you've been watching our messages for the last few weeks, you've been incredibly blessed. We had Pastor Reed a few weeks ago. We had Jasmine Frazier 2 weeks ago, who gave a really great sermon on love. And then last week we were blessed by Pastor Jordan and his message on the church and what it is and what it isn't. And I bring that up because I had made a short list of topics to talk about. And one by one, over the last few weeks, those topics left, leaving me with the topic that I am going to present on today. And just quickly as a disclaimer, I may say some things that, I don't know, hopefully they encourage a little bit of growth and a little bit of thought, but I'm not saying them because I am perfect. I'm not saying them because I have it figured out. I am only saying them because they're on my heart, and I feel as though they are things that we need to be paying attention to. So if you'll pray with me, then I can kind of jump into what I've got going on here this morning. Lord, you did it. I'm here. And now I just pray that you are here with me and in me as well. And as I share some thoughts and some ideas, and most importantly, I share you, Lord, that you will be with us in this building, and for anyone who is paying attention online, that you will just continue to bless the hearts and minds of those that are with us. Amen. So I don't have any PowerPoints. I don't have any, you kind of just left watching me meander around up here, which is somewhat intentional because our camera guys have been lucky that people just do this, and so I'm going to move. But so, and they got the wide angle shot now, so they don't want to have to work too hard. So you'll notice the title of my topic today is Culture and Christianity. And Becky's children's story touched on culture a little bit. And so I'm going to start with the word culture on its own, okay? And so as we look up the definition of the word culture in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, you get kind of two different things that pop out that are very similar. But the first one is the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or a social group. And then the other version of that is the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or an organization, right? So a lot of us, when we hear the word culture, we can immediately think of foreign cultures, right? Different ways that people do things. We are blessed in our church and in a lot of churches to have some of those cultures that come into our lives and we get the chance to experience them, Some of us have been able to experience foods that we may never have tried anywhere else, which food can be very much cultural, right? And we get to experience these things. So, when you get into some synonyms for what the word culture means, you start to see words like lifestyle, customs, traditions, heritage, habits, all of those things kind of come into this cultural meaning and definition. So then I thought to myself, but really, what does culture mean, right? Like, I mean, really, like, what does it mean? And as I thought about it, it comes down to the way we dress is very cultural, right? So dressing up for church and putting on a tie, which I don't wear all the time, right, is culturally accepted in the church building, right? Some of us wear shirt and ties every single day of the week. Some of us only own one tie because we wear it once a week, right? And so the way that we eat, I mentioned food already. The way that we talk, some of you know that I am from the South, and most people don't recognize that in my voice. But boy, let me tell you, I can go ahead and turn it on when I need to, okay? And I find myself, after I've spent time with my friends and family from the South, that comes back in and back in. And I'll throw out a reckon every now and again, right? And people go, what does that word mean, right? So certainly the way we talk, the way we celebrate holidays can be very cultural, right? A lot of, the quinceañera comes to mind, or the bar mitzvah, right? Those are cultural celebrations, and that doesn't happen in every culture, right? For some of us, that's just another birthday, right? So there's certainly those type of things. The way that we think can be culturally driven quite a bit, right? I mean, those cultures can really start to impact the way that we think about different things. Culture makes us who we are, right? Now, we get born. We've had children. We've been around children. When you were born as a child, you were born into a culture. You didn't have any control over the culture you got born into. You didn't have any say-so. But through your impressionable years, you're getting raised in a culture, right? Whatever your parents believe, whatever your parents' values are, whatever the friends they hang out with, all of that stuff, you're getting surrounded by that. That is the culture that you grow up in. That is what you know, right? And, sometimes you recognize maybe there's something different, right? Sometimes you don't. Culture can also really put a pair of glasses on our eyes. And that's how we see the world, is through the culture that we are in and that we've been raised with, right? Now, sometimes those glasses provide a better look, and sometimes those glasses can provide a not so good look, right? But culture is going to explain who we are, where we are, how we see the world, right? Now, culture can change in our lives. Certainly, there's times in our life where we can identify something. As we continue to age, as we continue to do different things in life, the people that we meet along the way. So I pose a question that I'm not going to answer right now, but is it easy to change your culture? So think about that for a minute. I'm going to share an example that we may or may not find. Some people in here may not find it funny. But you're born in Michigan, and everybody in your house bleeds maize and blue. Everybody. Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, cousins, everybody in the family bleeds maize and blue. You are a U of M fan through and through. That is the only acceptable team to root for, right? Now, one day, as you're out and you meet someone new, and you say, oh, well, then all of a sudden you start to read a couple things, you start to see a couple things, and the next thing you know, a little bit of scarlet and gray might pop up in the wardrobe. So then one day you decide, Ohio State is really doing a lot of great things, right? Ohio State is not as bad as my dad and brother and everybody made it out to be. There is actually something good happening at Ohio State. So then you show up at home one day, and it happens to be a particular day in November, and you're wearing this Ohio State stuff because you have now found out for yourself that Ohio State isn't the bad thing that we made it out to be, and now you are going to be a fan of Ohio State. Now, in some homes, you wouldn't be allowed inside, right? They won't let you come in. But I mean, that's kind of a lighthearted example of all of a sudden something in your life has changed. Maybe that was the school you got accepted to, whatever, but now you have this as a part of you, whereas you grew up with something else. Hopefully your family is accepting of that to a certain degree, and it becomes lighthearted ribbing as opposed to, Now Another example, and we get into culture a little bit, is that, you know, you have a young man who grows up in a semi-Catholic household, right? And by semi-Catholic is you go to church on Christmas, you go to church on Easter, a little bit of stuff here and there. And one day in high school, you meet a young woman who won't be named, and her family invites you to learn some things about the Bible, right? And you start to see things that have never been pointed out to you before, and they make sense, right? They make sense to you. And so now all of a sudden you're like, well, I believe that stuff too now. Amen. Only the family accuses you of going against your family's culture. This was our culture, right? Why are you turning your back on what we believe? And it's an awakening to things that you didn't know before, but they seem to make sense now, right? And so you're changed by that sort of exercise, right? You know, to put it in another way, perhaps you've always believed in a certain ideology, and you guys can use your imagination and insert that ideology in your own minds, right? It always made sense. All your friends, everybody, always all believed in this same fashion. You found that this is what you talked about in your social groups, right? This just is what you guys did, right? But then all of a sudden, one day, something feels off about this ideology, right? Maybe it's become too extreme. Maybe it has shifted. Maybe it has changed. Maybe you've changed. Maybe you've shifted, right? Now you start to ask yourself questions, but you can't ask the questions to your friends because they firmly believe in this ideology, right? And so now you find yourself asking, what do I do with this information? Now, culture can have some really positive impacts on our lives, but it can also fence us in into a particular way of thinking and a particular way of acting, right? So I'm going to leave culture alone for a minute, and we're going to come back and visit that here in just a few minutes. So the other word that pops up on your bulletin is the word Christianity or Christian. Now, I don't need to go into too much. I would imagine everybody in here understands that word, right? Knows what that word means. You know, the actual definitions as found in the Merriam-Webster and a couple of our online dictionaries are one who professes a belief in the teachings of Jesus Christ. Another one would be exhibiting a spirit proper to a follower of Jesus Christ or Christ-like. Someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? So in searching multiple dictionaries, they all kind of say the same thing, right? Christian is believing in the teachings of Jesus, right? Now, as our speaker last week pointed out, the word Christian or Christianity is mentioned in our Bibles 3 times, right? The first one being in Acts 11, verse 26, and you don't have to turn there. We're not going to play everybody flip to the verse real quick. We're just going to, where this is the first time the disciples were called Christians in Antioch, right? Christian gets used again in Acts 26, 28, in a conversation with Paul, where he says, you almost persuaded me to become a Christian, right? And then the last time is in 1 Peter 4:16, yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this matter. Now, if you ever get bored and you want to dive into what the word Christian means, you can really fall down a rabbit hole. I almost did. I had to pull myself back out and be like, whoa. We all accept what the word Christian means, regardless of what you can kind of find in this internet definition of Christian. So for the premise of what we're doing here today is we all agree Christian is a believer in the believer in the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? Now, let's think about that for a minute. The teachings of Jesus Christ, right? Would you say those are hard or easy concepts? Yes, that's a fantastic answer. I mentioned the men's group book study that we were doing. The author of that book, a gentleman by the name of Patrick Morley, points out this statistic in a chapter that he writes in there that states that the words of Jesus in our Bible, the red letter words, if you count them all, there are 34,450 words that Jesus is recorded as saying, right? 34,450 words. Now, if you assume, and I did some research on this, And there were some that, well, Jesus spoke 31,000 words or he spoke 36,000 words. I mean, you can, you take out the duplicates depending on your version. You can play around. But I think it doesn't change the point of what we're trying to make here. Now, the average person can speak 125 words per minute, right? Teenage girls exceed that. Teenage boys come way under that, right? But 125 words a minute. Now, a side note, as I was preparing my sermon, I was like, 125 words, I'm looking at my Word document, I don't have enough, right? I'm going to be done in like 5 minutes. So that was an interesting statistic for me as I learned as well. But 125 words per minute. So if you take the 34,450 words and you just stood up here and read them all to a congregation, you're looking at about 9 to 10 30-minute sermons, right? 5 hours of words recorded in Scripture that Jesus is written down as having said that were important enough to make it into the book, right? Now, I'm sure Jesus said more words than that, right? But they weren't important enough to find their way into the Scriptures that we read. Now, Jesus' ministry was 3 years, give or take, right? So, quick math there, 26,280 hours of ministry, right? 24 hours a day, that 3-year time period. 5 hours of words, 26,000 hours of ministry. 5 hours of words, 26,000 hours of ministry. Now, I'm sure he took some time to sleep, rest, right? Some time for himself. But I think where we're going with this is Jesus did more teaching in his actions than he did teaching with his words, right? I mean, the healings, all the things that he did was more about what he was doing and less about what he was saying, right? Now, he spoke when he had to, right? He certainly spoke to the people when he knew he could deliver a message that they needed. But his actions were what really drove his ministry. Now, we talked about the teachings of Jesus being easy, or not, right? So, we're not going to go through them all, but, my Bible happens to have this section in the back which lists out all the parables of Jesus, and there was 36 or 37 of them, right? Has all the miracles of Jesus, and there was 38 to 40 of them. Again, dive into your own research. How many parables were there? How many were there not? How many did Jesus say? How many did he not say? That's a Sabbath afternoon activity if I've ever seen one, right? Now, we go through some of the teachings. Love your enemies, Luke chapter 6, right? We go to do not judge, also found in Luke chapter 6. We go to you will be known by your fruits, in Matthew chapter 7. Teachings on forgiveness. And again, these are words spoken by Jesus. So of those very, very few words he spoke in his ministry, these are topics that he hit on in his teachings. Beware of hypocrisy, something he made sure to point out. And then you get into something here at Paw Paw Church that we believe very, very fully in. Matthew chapter 22, 37 to 40. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets, right? We're all familiar with that. We've heard that, right? You move on, you go into John 14, 15. If you love me, keep my commandments. He gave us 2 commandments. If you love me, keep those commandments. Okay? Pastor Sean highlighted this a few weeks ago. A new commandment I give to you is that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, is being a Christian simple? We can sure make it seem like it is. We even have a t-shirt. It says, love God, love others. Simple. We printed it on t-shirts and we wear them on our bodies, right? It can be simple when we focus on the greatest commandment, which is love, right? Now, most of us are in committed relationships with someone that we love. Loving that person is not always easy, except for my wife, who's an angel. Love takes work, right? We have some very, very long-standing couples in here that can easily give better talks on how much work love can take, right? Love takes work. And we have to be willing to put in the work, right? So the success of relationships is on the work we put into them and on the focus of love. Okay, so now I've given you two words. We have culture and we have Christian, okay? We've talked about them separately. What happens when we put those two words together? You can put them together. There's two words. You can get two options for putting those words together. You can put them together as Christian culture or culture Christian, okay? Now, obviously, when you put them together, they bring on a new meaning, right? So I'm going to start with Christian culture, with Christian being the first. And the way that I thought about this was, which one's the horse and which one's the wagon, right? And I'm sure somewhere there's an English teacher that can give me the actual way that we should talk about those, and adjectives and objects and subjects and all that stuff, but I'm not that guy. So we have horse and wagon, right? So if we consider that Christian is the horse and culture is the wagon, and then we go back to those definitions that we talked about in the beginning, you end up with a statement that reads like this: the followers of the teachings of Jesus will lead the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of racial, religious, and social groups. The teachings of Jesus will lead these traits. Wow. How powerful is that thought process? The things that make us and the things that make our groups being led by the teachings of Jesus. Imagine how that comes into a political conversation or a social justice conversation or racial conversations, right? Socioeconomic conversations, medical conversations, right? The teachings of Jesus lead the customary beliefs and the social forms of what we're doing, right? That leads culture, right? Too often times we don't necessarily see that leading our culture. So you go to the inverse of that statement, culture Christian, and we go back to our definition. The customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of racial, religious, and social groups will lead the followers of the teachings of Jesus. So now, the cultural beliefs are leading the followers of the teachings of Jesus. And sadly, this is what we see, I feel, more than not. And our church walls don't protect us from this. Our own families don't protect us from this, right? How often do we make justifications because that's just the way things are done? Because culture dictates it's okay to think that way because that's the way things are done, right? All right? How often are we going with the flow of a group of people because these are my friends? I can't tell them that they're wrong or that I feel that they're wrong. I can't even have that conversation with them. I can't be an Ohio State fan in my family, right? I can't do it. But at some point in time, we recognize that something has to change, right? And if you're not the one who realizes that the culture is the one that's the horse and it's leading Christianity, then we have to change some things up, right? So according to a 2020 census of American religion, 7 in 10 Americans identify as Christian. 70% of people in this country. It's closer to 30% of the world. There's a lot more religions when you get into the world category. But I'm going to ask a question. Don't need verbal answers. Most of us are on social media. We've got it. We don't like that we got it, but we got it. There's several different platforms. Does it seem as though the stuff that you see posted comes from 70% of people that are Christian? Is the 30% really dominating these forums that we're in? Right? How many of us can be in a Christian culture when we come to church, but then we're culture Christians when we leave the church? Because in here, it's easy to have Christ be first. Out there, it's not. People we work with, people that are our friends, right? Culture dictates what we immerse ourselves in. Particular news channel that you like to watch, right? Particular radio station that you listen to. Changes our viewpoints, impacts us in a culture, right? And sometimes we don't even realize it's happening, right? It can happen so slowly that all of a sudden one day you can wake up and go, whoa, what just happened, right? We're dealing with a humanitarian crisis in the Ukraine, awful stuff that's going on over there. And yet, as you scroll through some social media feeds, people are upset about gas prices. People are picking on political leaders. This is their fault. This is his fault. This is that fault, right? Some people, as Mona pointed out, are losing homes in life and family. Culture dictates, what's in it for me, right? How does this affect me, right? We look at things in our fence, like a country's borders being a fence. Those are those people, we are we people. You guys stay over there, we'll stay over here, everybody's happy, right? But that fence is limiting what we can actually be in the world, right? It is affecting how we are actually showing Christ and his teachings to the people that are around us, right? Rowan shared with us our scripture, right? And I'm going to expand on it a little bit. So if you want to turn to this verse with me, you're welcome to. 1 John chapter 3, 16 through 18. In 16, we start with, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us. And we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. Lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? How does it? How does the love of God abide in that person? My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Again, our actions are going to do way more than our words ever will, right? And the teachings of Jesus, my answer is the teachings of Jesus are simple. When you start with love, everything else falls into place. When you love someone, dealing with some of the things that they do is not as hard as someone who doesn't love them, right? Ellen White, and I'm almost done here, but Ellen White writes in Acts of the Apostles, the completeness of Christian character is attained when the impulse to help and bless others springs constantly from within. It is the atmosphere, or culture, of this love surrounding the soul of the believer that makes him or her a savior of life unto life and enables God to bless his or her work. Right? So, my prayer and my hope, and as I have watched things happen over the last several years, and I am by no means an old man, but I am older, as much as I don't like to admit it, is that we really start to look at what we're allowing to lead some of our decisions and some of our actions and some of our desires. Because culture has a bigger impact on us than any of us will even want to admit. And I'm as guilty as anyone, right? But when you actually dive back into an old statement that was popular years ago, WWJD, what would Jesus do, right? Many of us probably had the bracelets. You probably wore the stuff. It was a popular trend a long time ago. But how powerful would it be if that was actually something that we were still adhering to in our world today? Earlier, I left you with the thought of culture fencing us in and limiting our view, right? So when we start to realize that the culture we're in might not be where we're supposed to be, we have to start fighting for love. We have to. We have to start fighting for love. We have to start fighting for our brethren instead of against our brethren. Note I said for our brethren, not against our brethren. And brethren is any other human being standing up and talking to you, right? It has nothing to do with any line, any fence, any social platform. The brethren are anyone who you encounter, period. Hard stop. What are we doing to fight for all of our brethren instead of against all of our brethren? And we have to start letting the teachings of Jesus lead the way. So we're going to sing now. The lovely ladies are going to come back up and sing for us. Hymn 319. Lord, I want to be Christian.